All right, back on Five on the Floor, Alex Salido and George Sedano from ESPN. All right, George, let's get right to it. We're going to talk two players here, and that's it. LeBron James and Anthony Davis. You've obviously watched LeBron this year, in some senses, kind of conserve himself for this sort of moment. There were some questions when he got to the bubble about his lift. I don't know if those questions really are applicable anymore. But the other thing that we're certainly going to get into on a bunch of episodes here is that the Miami Heat seem to have a team that's built to at least frustrate him, not contain him, but frustrate him. You have a very competitive defender in Jay Crowder. You have Andre Iguodala, who literally won a Finals MVP for his work guarding him, even though he had ridiculous stat line. You have Jimmy Butler, who is one. I would say Jimmy Butler is one of the 10 players in the league that LeBron most respects. And every time he speaks about him, you can sense that. And you have Bam Adebayo, who is the freak big that before he got Anthony Davis is probably the guy that LeBron James would fit best with, who's going to be defending him. And then you throw in Derrick Jones Jr. as a fifth. So, I mean, they've got 5 guys to throw at him. How do you think that goes?
I think that they will throw looks at him that will frustrate him at times. I still think he's at the peak of his powers. Now, whatever he's lost, and I know you mentioned the lift stuff earlier, I don't think that's representative now. But, I mean, look, he's 35. You know what I mean? So what has he lost from an athleticism standpoint? A quarter step, a third of a step? You know what I'm saying? Like, whatever that is, I think that kind of really kind of shows itself more when he's trying to take guys off the dribble at the top of the key specifically. But, where defenses can kind of key in on him. But I still think that he just thinks ahead of the game so far, right? Like he can see things developing. He's one of those guys, Ethan, that because you've seen it, where he'll tell the opponent, "Hey, you're running the wrong. You're not running the play right. You should be standing here. This is going to happen, and this guy's coming off a curl here." Like him and Rasheed Wallace are the 2 guys I've actually seen do that in a game to an opponent, which is kind of crazy. You know what I mean? Actually, there's a third. It's Rondo. I saw Rondo do it once in Boston. So, like, he's just that good at knowing what the opponent is going to do. I do think that the team that would have given him the most trouble by far would have been the Clippers, just because you have 2 ultra high elite defenders on the perimeter. And as good as Miami is in bunches, they don't have that, right? But it doesn't mean they can't take away stuff that the Clippers did, right? Like if I were Eric, I'd be looking at what Kawhi and Paul and Doc did to LeBron, where he shot only 37% against them in 4 games. And I'd also look at what they did in the fourth quarters to Anthony Davis. Davis, I think, in 4 games only scored 10 total points in the fourth quarter. So those would be things that I would look at. I do think they have guys that, can absolutely make things a little more challenging for him. But I just think, and I said this about Eric actually recently too. So I'll use the same analogy. They're kind of like Neo in the Matrix. They've already seen everything before. Like there are a few things that will surprise them at this stage. So, where Neo stops the bullets in the movie, I feel like both Eric and LeBron in some ways can stop the bullets at this point.
So, George, you're talking about all the guys here that you can kind of throw at LeBron. I have a stat here. Lowest field goal percentage allowed since 2013-14 as the closest defender versus LeBron James. There's a minimum of 75 field goal attempts. Jimmy and Jay Crowder, numbers 2 and 3 on there, 41% and 42% respectively. And again, this isn't going to come down to one-on-one matchups. We all know this is going to be a team defensive game plan. But it is interesting that those percentages play out the way they do. What I did want to ask about was –
Well, I'm going to steal that stat, by the way. That's a good stat.
Okay, it's actually an ESPN stat, so I don't know if it's stealing.
Oh, so it already might be. It's not stealing that. It's probably in my packet that I haven't read yet.
but isn't Andre in that mix too? I saw another one that was thrown out there, another tweet today that Andre's in that. Like they have 3 of the top 5 or something along those lines. Maybe it's not the exact same numbers, but I mean they certainly have the guys.
Yeah, I mean they certainly have the guys. I think honestly the big difference here is look, the difference between LeBron and Giannis and whoever else they've faced, Jason Tatum, is that LeBron, as I mentioned, can think the game through better because he's seen so many things. Yep. And he's just a way better passer than any of those guys, So he's going to – I'm not saying you can't turn him over because clearly he can be turned over, but as any player can. But I do think that he is just better at recognizing things than the guys they've faced to this point. It's just a different level is what I would say.
So it's interesting that you say that because what I did want to ask about was the defensive game plan that I think Spo is going to throw at the Lakers. I don't think there's going to be one, just like there wasn't one versus the Celtics. You know, we all talked about the zone. Everybody talked about the zone, and that was probably the separator between the two. But there was a variety of stuff thrown at the Celtics. I think we're going to see some similar stuff. But you look at the Lakers, man. I know you would know this just as well as anyone. Their shooters are not that deadly. And I was just looking at a stat where they were kind of looking at the points per possessions of all their highest volume spot-up shooters. Not very good, especially when you compare them to the Heat. I think there's going to be some type of defensive game plan where they're going to see maybe stretches of zone, not for too long, because I know LeBron and AD eventually will pick apart the zone once they start getting into the middle there. And then Dwight Howard and JaVale are going to get a ton of offensive rebounds, and it's not going to look like something you can do for long stretches of time. But even when they're not running zone, when they're doing the man stuff and everything else, I think they're going to have some sort of game plan. It's going to be just about packing the paint, making sure LeBron and AD work every time they're trying to get in there, and then just kind of let the shooters beat you, because I really don't think any of those guys are deadly. And I know Danny Green is their best shooter. He's been around 35% all year. So even then, it's like the math might still work out in their direction if you allow them to take more threes than points in the paint.
That would be Ethan and I have talked about this a little bit, I think, off the air too, which is that would be the matchup. That would be what I would do if I were Eric. I would pack the paint. Anthony Davis's most inefficient shot, and it's a shot that he loves to take, interestingly enough, is the mid-range jumper from like free throw line extended, right? And he's not great at it. And he's great at everything else, though. You know, I know you can look at his three-point numbers and be like, they're not that good. But there's like this crazy stat of like when he takes a three-pointer, literally with the tippy toes right on the line, he's like 40-something%, like 42, 43% or something ridiculous like that.
He tries to do more than he can in the mid-range, where I feel like in the three, he's just setting and taking the shot.
Correct. He's more
Which is why the zone might be effective for a little while versus him, because it kind of makes him take some of those middies that he really likes taking.
Right. So I think packing the paint is the way to go. I would say let LeBron and AD get what they're going to get, right? And stay on their shooters, because they're not that good. They were ranked, I think, 23rd this season in three-point percentage as a team. I think the big difference for the Lakers, as opposed to these teams that Miami has faced, now they saw some of this with Boston, right? But the Lakers defense has been really, really good this year, like really good, like elite level good. And I'll give Frank Vogel this credit. Two things. One, he got LeBron to buy in defensively very quickly. And I think that was something that I was surprised by when we all saw LeBron guarding in November, right? Which we hadn't seen really since like 2013. So I think that he deserves credit there. The other thing, when we go into the matchups, and this is a coaching aspect of it, so sorry for veering off a little bit. The one thing Vogel has gotten better at, that he wasn't someone that would make crazy in-game adjustments all the time when he was with Indiana or Orlando, at least none that came to my mind. Since I've been watching him here in LA, he's become less conservative. He literally will start different people, not only in different games, but from half to half if he feels it's necessary to create better spacing for LeBron and AD. So I do think that this Frank Vogel is a different version than the one that the Heat saw, 6-7 years ago, or whatever it's been.
All right, we're going to get more into AD here to close this thing out. Before we do, we'll tell you about another sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's Biscayne Bay Brewing, the official craft beer of Inter Miami, the Miami Marlins, and, of course, us, the 5 Reasons Sports Network. This is South Florida's actual independent brewery. They're the ones not owned by anybody else. They're owned by local guys who employ people in this community to make their beer right here in South Florida. These guys are committed to our community and to supporting 5 Reasons Sports, so we can keep bringing you all the local sports content that you can handle. If you care about supporting local business, drinking amazing beer, grab their stuff, Marlins Lager, Miami Pale Ale, or Tropical Bay IPA at all major retailers throughout South Florida. I'm bringing some with me up to the bubble. Well, not actually inside the bubble, but to my hotel room. So I got something to do for the next couple of days. It's the only beer we're drinking at 5 Reasons Sports. Make sure to tag them at Biscayne Bay Brew with your beer, because they're very active on social media, and you'll get briefly famous. All right, let's get to this in 2 minutes here. George, we've got Anthony Davis and LeBron James, and you touched on Anthony there a little bit. I feel like the only big in the league that I would feel somewhat comfortable chasing Anthony Davis around with is the other guy from Kentucky, which is Bam Adebayo. We just saw the Bam breakout that I think we're all waiting for in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. And, Bam has gone from he's not a star, he's not an all-star, to all of a sudden now is this guy already emerging as a top 20, 25 player in the league. What can Bam do against him specifically? And how much would you put Bam on Anthony Davis? Or do the Heat going to need to roll some extra bigs if Dwight's going to play, if McGee's going to play, if LA's going to go a little bit bigger?
I think if you're the Heat, you may need to play more bigs because they're going to try to play JaVale and Dwight. I think that they're going to try to play to their strengths. But I think Miami's got some versatility, particularly with their bigs, as we know. And I know Myers hasn't played in a while, and Kelly didn't play much in these last couple of games with Boston. But the one area I think the Lakers struggle is when teams can spread them out, right, defensively. Because all of a sudden, if you're making Dwight and JaVale guard on the perimeter, I think that creates some challenges. Now, Houston tried to do that. The problem is Houston's biggest player is like 6'7", right? And I think that is a different, animal there altogether. But I think that Bam would be the guy that I would try to put on him. And I would at least I'm trying to think about this. Let me think, because I'm trying to think what they would do too. So I would probably start him on Dwight or JaVale or whoever's starting, right? But I would absolutely throw him on Anthony once the next big comes in, right? Like if you have a situation where you're playing Kelly O with him, I think that you let Kelly deal with whoever is going to be out there on the floor as the traditional center in Dwight or JaVale, and then you put Bam on AD. But I think Eric may have to go to that lineup more, but it's going to be really important for Olynyk and Myers, if he's in there, to hit those shots. I think that would be something that they're going to have to do. I just don't think they have enough size. Maybe Solomon Hill, right, would be one of those guys.
Here we go again.
Where you could find, not to get into the Solomon weeds, but I do think he might be able to help you there a little bit, right? Whether it's guarding one of the two centers for a few minutes or guarding AD, or at least just staying in front of him. Remember, he did play with AD, so he is familiar with AD's game.
Oh, true. Good point.
So I think that there is some familiarity there. Now, AD has become a better player since then. So, because at 27, he's now kind of starting to hit the peak of his powers. But I do think that there is some guys they can throw at him. I don't think he's an ideal matchup for anyone outside of Bam, though. And I think that's the huge challenge. But, we got to give Bam a lot of credit, man. Like, you mentioned it before we started, Ethan, this particular question. I mean, he had a tremendous game yesterday. He is only the fourth player in Heat history to go for 30, 10, and 5, or at least 30, 10, and 5 in a playoff game. The other three names are LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Shaq. Like, you have to understand what this kid is doing at only 23 years old. And he had like 3 or 4 straight possessions where he had that crazy dunk, right, on Tice. Then he hit him with like a hezzy, right, with like a jumper. And then he had that crazy wraparound pass with to Jimmy, right, late in the fourth quarter. All those things happened one after the other, after the other, after the other. Like, he really took over the game in a way that I think surprised me even a little bit, even though I've seen a lot of his growth from year to year.
I wanted to ask another thing. You're talking about AD here. I think one thing that the Heat are gonna give up, no matter what happens, no matter what game plan they throw out, is offensive rebounding towards the Lakers. And I think that's kind of the one thing that I'm really keying in on, because that's not really something that we talk about much when we talk about analysis. But this is one where it just really, really stands out, because one team is so obviously big, the other team's running small, and the matchup thing becomes a little bit tough because it's like, well, Bam's guarding the big man. I guess that's Jay Crowder on AD, and I think that's why we're going to see a lot of zone, because zone is another thing that gives up a lot of offensive rebounding. So I wonder if Spo looks at it like, well, if we're going to be giving up those offensive rebounds anyway, might as well throw in a defensive game plan that kind of prioritizes those three-point shots being taken and the paint being crowded.
Right.
I just think that's why this whole matchup is so complex. It's like it could go so many different ways, because I do trust LeBron to figure out a zone within 2-3 minutes if he's on the floor, right? Like, I do think we're going to see AD get doubled a lot, and I think that's something that we've seen him get, happen to him in the playoffs already. But the Heat don't really have a lot of options other than to do that and to run the zone. what I'm really asking here is, how do you feel about how effective AD will be? Can they really mitigate what he does as well as LeBron? You know what I'm saying? Like, can they contain the both of them and the offensive rebounding?
No, I don't think they can contain all that. And I think that becomes like, if you're asking me, and I haven't made an official pick yet because I'm still kind of mulling it over, to be honest with you. And I won't until tomorrow because I'm being asked on ESPN.com to make a pick by tomorrow at 6 o'clock Eastern. But I do think, like, if the Lakers were to win, I think the biggest reason will be Anthony Davis. And that's not a slight at LeBron. It's what we talked about earlier. It's LeBron is an active participant in the growth of Anthony Davis. And I think that LeBron may still win MVP, but I think that the player that will have made, in my opinion, if the Lakers were to win, to make the biggest impact will be AD. Because I think that it's gonna put a toll on Bam to have to guard both AD potentially and those bigs and keep them out. And as good as they are rebounding the ball, it's just a lot to ask of him at this stage. And I think this, right? And I was just asked a question on ESPN.com last week. We did like one of those poll questions with our experts, right? And one of the questions was, who has the brightest future in the East? And you could pick three teams, and I picked the Heat one, mostly because
not the Sixers.
Not the Sixers. I actually had the Sixers third in that list behind the Celtics. And people are like, well, why didn't you pick Brooklyn? I just don't trust Kyrie to stay healthy, to be honest with you, for a long stretch of time. And I don't know. I think Kevin Durant, if he's healthy, might be the best player on the planet, but I don't know. He's coming off an Achilles. You know what I mean? I got to see it first. So I picked Miami, Boston, and then Philly with just kind of an asterisk on the Nets. And I think it's that. It's just the growth that I've seen from Bam, the leaps and bounds he's taken both figuratively and literally. What we've seen from Hero here now is something that I don't think any of us really expected. And now you've already done the hard part, right? The hard part is finding two guys that can be potential franchise cornerstones. And that's like when the Heat had Wade, right? Like they were able to attract free agents because they had Dwayne. They got LeBron and Chris. So now they're going to go into 21 free agency with those two guys. They're going to land somebody. And it's going to be somebody good. So, their outlook is and if it is Giannis, then I really feel like they're going to hog up some championships potentially. So I think that, even though there is, the Lakers are an overwhelming favorite, all the numbers, right? The ESPN Basketball Power Index, all the analytics probably say the Lakers have a pretty damn good chance of winning this thing. I still think that, at the very least, this is an unbelievable learning experience for Bam and Hero and some of these guys that are going to be on this roster moving forward, because this type of like championship experience is invaluable, man. Like you then now know what it takes to get there and to then eventually win if you do happen to lose. And I just think that kind of stuff, man, is big, and I think we saw it a little bit with Dwayne and Udonis and those guys when they lost to the Pistons in 2005. And now look, a lot of that was Dwayne's rib, right? More than anything else. But I still think that losing to that Pistons team that was a champion the year before, right? I think that experience really, really catapulted Dwayne and Udonis to a different level when they had to play the next time.
More than that, George, it was to me, it was the 2004 series against Indiana. I mean, I always point to that one. I mean, we forget how good that Pacer team was.
They were very good, and you're right. That is a good one. But it
caliber team that
sure, but it was the second round, Ethan. It's not the same as losing in the Eastern Conference Finals.
I get it, but they played them to 6 games. You're talking about a team that had at that point. Ron Artest and Jermaine O'Neal were top 15 players.
Elite players at that time.
Elite, yes. And you had a Reggie Miller who was an older guy but was still contributing, and that was a pretty deep roster. And that was a team, if not for Malice in the Palace, that's to me, that was the best Indiana team. It was a better Indiana team than the Paul George, Danny Granger teams, for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Roy Hibbert teams. But yeah, I mean, I think that experience played into it. But yeah, you can't replicate what this team has just gone. It's not just that they've gone deep in the playoffs, it's that they've been together for 2 months and they've come out the other side of this thing.
Right.
There is, to me, they accelerated this process by 2 full seasons. I mean, they're already there. And so we won't make you make a pick here, but and Alex and I are not going to make them either.
I'll put it on Twitter. I will put it on Twitter.
No, I know
It'll
you
be
will.
On, and here's the last thing on Bam.
Yes.
I talked to Udonis before the bubble started, and I asked him about like who's the next guy, like who's the guy, like the keeper, of the culture, all that, this, that, and the other. And he says the next guy is Bam. He's like, I'm almost positive it's going to be Bam. Like he is just made differently. And I think that everything that he's done, everything that he has said in this bubble to the media, including yesterday when he was interviewed by Rachel, just shows me that, God, he absolutely is in the mold of Zoe and Udonis and, Dwayne and all of these guys. Like he's absolutely cut from that same cloth. It's pretty crazy.
Well, he said it before the season. I mean, he said it on Instagram. I mean, he basically said, this is the dude right here. And I thought it was interesting. He said it at the time because you still had Winslow on the roster, who had been anointed by some. This is supposed to be point justice year. And he just
remember the magazine cover of Wade.
Right, the magazine cover of Wade. But and not only that, but look, Jimmy doing the Slam magazine interviews with Hero and with Bam together. Yeah. Like I said, John Calipari deserves a playoff share. George, thanks for joining us.
Hey, one more thing before you let me go.
One more thing. Go ahead.
One more thing. Do you honestly believe this team would be there if Justice Winslow was still on this roster?
Oh my!
No, I'll let you guys debate that. I got to get to Orlando. That's it.
Why? Why do we got to do this?
We'll save that for episode. My 7th appearance. We'll save that for that.
You can come back if they win the championship. You can, and we'll even talk Sixers for 10 minutes. I got to hit the road. So, thanks for finding a bucolic setting there in the backward. Thanks for not staying in the weeds too long on Solomon Hill. Check out our sponsors, of course. Biscayne Bay Brewing. Also, some of the others we didn't mention today, youbreakwheelfix.com, our friend louispeters.com, if you're looking for someone to help you with insurance, and, of course, safecubbies.com and more. We're going to be pumping out these episodes regularly, so make sure you subscribe. Subscribe for free. It's not hard, and you'll find out by notification when we've posted again. Talk soon.